اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور. اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم. أما بعد, and welcome to another video on the Islamic Knowledge YouTube channel. And today we're having a look at this kitab, and it's written by the scholar, a very critically acclaimed, very prestigious scholar, Al-Imam Abu Shamah al-Maqdisi rahimahullah ta'ala, who passed away in 665 Hijri. Now, he's a very notable Shafi'i scholar. In fact, there is a very famous Darul Hadith, a very famous madrasa that existed in the past, and it existed in Damascus, and it was known by the name of Darul Hadith al-Ashrafiyya. And this madrasa was actually, it was a madrasa in which the first teacher or the first Shaykhul Hadith of this madrasa was Imam Ibn Salah rahimahullah, the author of the famous Muqaddimah Ibn Salah, Ma'rifatu Anwa'i Ilm al-Hadith. Straight after Ibn Salah, the next Shaykhul Hadith was this scholar here, Abu Shamah al-Maqdisi, a teacher of the likes of Imam al-Nawawi. As we know, Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah later also became the head muhaddith at Darul Hadith al-Ashrafiyya. And this Darul Hadith, this madrasa had great scholars who taught inside this madrasa, the likes of Taqiyuddin al-Subki, al-Imam al-Mizzi, Hafiz ibn Kathir, Tajuddin al-Subki, Ibn Nasiruddin al-Dimishqi, and many other great scholars who taught in this madrasa. So he was the second teacher to have ever taught in this madrasa. And he wrote a kitab which is titled, this is actually a muqaddimah to a kitab. So he was planning to write a big book called al-Ilm-Al-Jami' Bayn al-Fiqh wal-Athar. And before that, he wrote a short khutbah, a short muqaddimah to the book. So that's why this muqaddimah is referred to as Khutbatul Kitab al-Mu'ammal. Khutbah, the introduction to a book that was awaited, that we were waiting for. Li'l-Radd Ila'l-Amr al-Awwal, to take us back to the Quran and Sunnah. Essentially, this book, what he was planning to do in this book, Abu Shamah al-Maqdisi, was to go through every mas'ala of fiqh and to essentially extract the authentic hadith from Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in that mas'ala and say that this is essentially the correct position. So this is what you might, in this day and age, you may refer to as the ultimate manifesto for perhaps someone who is following the Salafi way of thinking. But to be honest with you, we're not touching on that, and this video hopefully will have less reference to that and more towards the fawaid and the beauty of this book in terms of it being an introduction towards fiqh. So just to clarify, we've got a book that he's written called Al-Ilm-Al-Jami' Bayn al-Fiqh wal-Athar. He never actually wrote it, he never got time. If I'm not mistaken, he actually passed away, and he kind of indicates in the Muqaddimah as well that he knows he's not going to make it. He's not going to be able to write this book, or he starts it, if I'm not mistaken, actually. He does start the book, and then he says, in fact in the Muqaddimah, he says that I'm on this chapter, etc. And then he indicates that I'm not going to be able to finish this book. And he didn't actually manage to finish it. And I don't think we've actually found this book, but I could be wrong. So Khutbatul Kitab al-Mu'ammal is an introduction to this book that he was planning to write, wherein he was essentially going to go back to the Sunnah for every single mas'ala. And he actually wrote another book titled al-Kitab, and the introduction here of that book is found as well, al-Kitab al-Marqum. So if you have a look here, he wrote another book called al-Kitab al-Marqum fi Jumlatin min al-Ulum, in which he gathered all of his books that he wrote into one book called al-Kitab al-Marqum. And in this book, he puts the introduction to al-Ilm al-Jami' as a part of al-Kitab al-Marqum. So the muhaqqiq of the kitab, by the name of Jamal Azzoon, he's done a really good research, I think, wallahu alam, of this book. Like pretty decent introduction. He speaks about Abu Shamah al-Maqdisi. By the way, he became shaheed. Near the end of his life, he was murdered, rahimahullahu ta'ala. He was known for being a bit, like he said it like it is. He was quite, he spoke his mind, didn't feel like he needs to hold back his tongue from saying what he feels to be the truth, rahimahullah. And maybe for that reason, he was made shaheed. And two people, they came to him. He says, that two people came to him and they pretended to be asking a question at his door. When he opened the door, فَضَرَبَاهُ ضَرْبًا مُبَرِّحًا كَادَ أَنْ يَتْلِفَ مِنْهُ وَرَاحَ وَلَمْ يَدْرِ بهما أحد ولا أغاثه أحد. No one helped him and no one found out who these two people were, and he passed away essentially from the pain of this violent attack. But anyway, what I want to speak about is how unique this book is in terms of it being an introduction to fiqh. So essentially he's laying down his reasons as to why he feels we need to go back to the sunnah, etc. But before doing that, he speaks about the development of fiqh, and it's really fantastic. And he first starts off with فضل العلم والعلماء. Then he speaks about اندراس أعلام العلم والشكوى المؤلف من ذلك. Then he speaks about في نفاسة طلب العلم. He speaks about فضل العلم again from the kalam of the Salaf. He brings loads of statements of the scholars of the past about the فضل العلم. So this could be added to that list of الجامع لأخلاق الراوي, جامع بيان أخذ العلم وفضله, المدخل إلى كتاب السنن, علم السنن, whichever one you want to call it. So he speaks a little bit about مجالس الفقه, مذاكرة العلم, and it's really just a fantastic discussion on the development of fiqh itself. شعر في فضل العلم. Then he goes into Imam al-Shafi'i's life. So again, really, as I always mention, Imam al-Shafi'i's biography is so important when it comes to the history of fiqh. And he's mentioned some absolute gems inside this biography as well. And I want to and then he carries on and then he speaks. And then the last part of the book is really fantastic. He quotes extensively from Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, from Ihya Ulumuddin about the importance of tasawwuf. So one thing we notice about this book is that firstly, he, and I will by the way share these notes on the Telegram channel, so if you can join our Telegram channel, and I'll put the link right in the center of the screen right there, so if you do want to join it, and I'll try to put these notes if I can. They're very disjointed, but they might help you. So first thing that we need to know is that a number of scholars did say that Abu Shamah had reached a level of ijtihad. So there's a comment here on page 20 wherein here Tajuddin al-Fazari بلغ الشيخ شهاب الدين Abu Shamah رتبة الاجتهاد. So although he's calling towards ijtihad, it's important to understand that he himself had reached a level of ijtihad as well. And secondly, one of the things that he does seem to have reached is a level in tasawwuf which was very high as well, because he speaks about the importance of tazkiyah and cleansing oneself near the end of the book. So this is something that you will notice with a lot of the people who the early scholars who may have called towards this idea of going back to the Quran and Sunnah, only that they did have these two key qualities that a person needs to have, which is lots of knowledge and complete refrainment of following the hawa. But anyway, he speaks about the fada'il of fiqh, and then I want to just mention just a few things. The fact that Imam Ahmad rahimahullah used to consider Imam Shafi'i mujaddid, you can find that on page 74. You can find out this, this one is one that I wanted to share. Page 137, an interesting idea. For those who are planning to get married, perhaps have a look at this. كان العلماء من قدماء أصحابنا يعتنون بمختصر المزني حفظا وشرحا وبسببه سهل تحصيل مذهب الشافعي رحمه الله على طلابه في ذلك الزمان. And he says وسمعه من المزني خلق عظيم من الغرباء ورحل إليه بسببه وامتلأت بنسخه البلدان حتى إنه بلغني أن المرأة كانت إذا جهزت للدخول على زوجها, when a woman would be sent away, like on her rukhsati, and when she's about to go to visit her new husband, حمل في جهازها مصحف ونسخة من مختصر المزني. She'd have with him the Quran and one nuskha of مختصر المزني, which kind of shows the importance of fiqh, that fiqh is essentially the understanding of the Quran and Sunnah. Then he speaks a little bit here on page 124. He mentions that some of the early scholars, the reason as to why they differed with the hadith was that the hadith may have not reached them. As we know, this is not exactly something that I feel to be entirely accurate. I do feel that wasn't the full picture. It was more to do with methodology. But nonetheless, there are some, naturally in a book like this, there are some strange comments as well. There is a part wherein he says that everywhere where I think the hadith is authentic, then that is the madhab of Imam al-Shafi'i, right? Which is obviously, he's fully acting upon the idea of إِذَا صَحَّ الْحَدِيث فَهُوَ مَذْهَبِي. But he himself, he mentions in regards to إِذَا صَحَّ الْحَدِيث فَهُوَ مَذْهَبِي on page 150, that Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah, when he said إِذَا صَحَّ الْحَدِيث فَهُوَ مَذْهَبِي, then he is referring to the mujtahideen. He says that here as well on page 150. He says ولا يتأتى ذلك إلا من عالم بعلوم الاجتهاد فذلك هو الذي خاطبه الشافعي رحمه الله. So Abu Shamah is quite fair in this book. That strange comment that I mentioned is on page 147. He says جمع في هذا الكتاب مذهب الشافعي إن شاء الله, right, which as we know is a bit of a strange comment, but nonetheless there's other fantastic bits, like how fiqh passed on in the generations from one person to another. كيف انتقل الفقه. On page 66 you can read about how fiqh moved from one person to another. ثم انتقل إلى الإمام بعبد الله. ثم you got this whole انتقال of ilm throughout the generations. وببغداد أصحاب أبي حنيفة والشافعي وأصحابه وأحمد بن حنبل ثم أبو ثور وأبو عبيد القاسم. So you've got this whole introduction to fiqh, which makes this book so beautiful. And you've been noticed, for example, again on page 134, what have we got on page 134? You got a kind of indication that Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah wasn't someone who just followed the opinions of Ibrahim al-Nakha'i and that's it. He looked at precedent, but it wasn't just Ibrahim al-Nakha'i that he looked at, which as we know, Shah Waliullah rahimahullah kind of creates that impression, but it's not entirely accurate. So we've got evidences for that as well. Again, the book is fully referenced really well, I think. You can see sometimes the muhaqqiq tries to go back to the original source. So this is Ibn Ma'in in his Tarikh, Riwayat al-Duri. So this is like a really, really fantastic kitab. Again, if I share the notes, you can have a look at a deeper study of some of the fahiris, al-fawaid of the book. But it's a really fantastic kitab. The muhaqqiq's done, I think, a really fantastic job. He's got a index of all the key comments, fihris of ahadith, fihris al-athar. The contents is really good, easy to follow, quite detailed, not very vague as sometimes we notice it's found. And the ending part of this book is really something that I would recommend, when he speaks about tasawwuf and the importance of a faqih to be someone who is راغب إلى الآخرة زاهد عن الدنيا. And in any case, this book is a fantastic kitab to read. Anybody who's engaged in fiqh, wanting to learn about how fiqh developed, how it started off, how fiqh transferred from one scholar to another, what were the main cities of fiqh, I think this is a good book. Inshallah ta'ala, I think you'll benefit from this book. And it's a book written by a very pious mujtahid scholar. Inshallah ta'ala, I hope you benefit from this book. If you benefited from this video, please do give it a like. Share it with others who may also benefit. And please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Jazakumullahu khairan wa ahsan al-jaza.
به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور اطلب العلم